Oh, I'm having an issue with my video, so I guess we'll go right into it. Hello, everyone. Michael Jordan fans are the best, and today we're going to be having a debate between NB Sports and FYF Sports, where they'll be debating who's greater, the '86 Celtics or the 2017 Golden State Warriors. First off, before we get into that, how are y'all doing today? NB Sports, how are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me as always.
Lamont, how you doing today?
I'm solid, man. I'm doing good. I'm just chugging along, man. That's it.
Awesome. Do y'all have anything to say before the debate starts? You want to say to anybody or?
No, it's just this is a more difficult one because it's crazy because I had this team, the Celtics, as one of my top teams.
We both had these guys in our top 5.
Yeah, so it's finicky. You got to start picking apart the finer things. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's a 2 versus 2. So I think you both had the '96 Bulls, and then it's both your second best teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, since Lamont has the larger channel, he elected to go second. He had the pick, and we'll get right into the debate, and then after that, we'll follow up with some Q&A and everything like that, and some chat.
Are we doing 4 rounds since there's an 8 on there? I'm okay with 4 rounds.
Oh no, it's 5. I had to restart my computer, so let me fix that.
All right.
Yeah, I had some technical difficulties. So thanks for catching that. All right. Nope, it'll be 5 3-minute rounds, and then 10-second primer. Are you ready, Nick?
Let's go.
All right, let's do it.
Three, 2, 1.
All right, as my opponent kind of mentioned there in the intro, this is going to be a very picky debate topic, right? So for this debate, I specifically, my angle here is I want to focus on and drive a wedge between the terms of the word roster and the term of the word team, right? Remember, we are arguing who is a better basketball team, right? And as we said, obviously, these are 2 all-time great teams and rosters. For reference, we kind of mentioned it earlier. I had those 17 Warriors at number 5. He has them at number 2. He has the Celtics at number 3, and I had the Celtics at number 2. So again, just like we kind of said with the all-time top 10 debate, we're going to have to really get into the nuance and context and get on a little bit of a deeper level, since the difference between these all-time great teams or players or eras are so minuscule and small. But remember, my ultimate thing that I want to do here is focus on the word team, right? When we quickly look across the board at the team stats, these 2 teams are surprisingly close in proximity to each other, believe it or not. There are not many glaring differences, statistically speaking. Most categories or in-season rankings have a difference of maybe only 1 to 2 points, or 1 to 2 percentage points, or 1 to 2 spots. They had the same regular season record, and we could talk matchups between the Warriors' backcourt and the Celtics' front court until we were blue in the face. The perimeter sharpshooting versus the relentless interior physicality. The modern-day spread versus the old-school bruising inside-outside game. Offensive firepower versus a balanced attack. There's no way for either of us to really fully prove what style in each respective era is or would be superior. So I bring us back to the word team. In specific terms of basketball and how it relates to a team, we usually think about cohesion, being battle-tested, having a pedigree, and being dependable or reliable. In my opinion, in these intangible things, the Boston Celtics are going to edge out the Warriors and be the better team. In terms of dependability or reliability, I think the Celtics stars are ready to go 48 minutes for 7 games without blinking. Going into deep waters on tired legs is most certainly an advantage for the Celtics. Between the 2 teams, we know one thing for sure in terms of a pedigree, and that is the Celtics don't lose at home. They were 40-1 during the regular season, 50-1 if you include all the way up to the end of the finals. The other pedigree is very obvious. I think they have easily the best player on either side of the court. Larry Bird at this point would win his third straight MVP, which has only been done by a few other players, and essentially cemented himself as the best player in the league at the time. I'll get into some of the other things, but these are the initial things I wanted to address about them being a better team.
I like to break this down in criteria. All right, if we're talking about the greatest teams of all time, you have to have some type of set criteria. So I want to break it down into 3 elements. Obviously, you got the team aspect, you got the individual stardom aspect, you got what did they accomplish aspect, and then you just got the general overall narratives, the non-basketball aspects that you have to consider. And when you look at all of those things, I just think that the Golden State Warriors check off the box in all of those categories, and it's not even really close when you really start to dive into this. First element I want to just address, and there's multiple elements I'm going to address in each round, is just the talent depth on this team. Let's just talk about the talent depth on team. We can start with Steph Curry. We can start with Kevin Durant, both of whom are MVPs in their prime on one team. And we're talking about a Kevin Durant. When you talk about the team aspect, who the Golden State Warriors were able to seamlessly integrate into a already championship roster. This was a seamless integration. All right. And we'll get to that additional element later, but he was able to seamlessly integrate himself into that roster, mesh with Klay Thompson, mesh with Draymond Green to create one of the most feared teams in NBA history. And we're talking about a Klay Thompson who at the time was recognized as one of the best two-way players in the game. He was already one of the best shooters in NBA history, along with Steph Curry, and with Kevin Durant being one of the best scorers in NBA history at that particular time as well, right? This Warriors star-studded lineup, 4 All-Stars. This is in the moment, not what they did in other years. In the moment, there were 4 All-Stars on this particular team, and it's just surprising because we see how many teams struggle trying to integrate stars. With 4 All-Stars, they were able to seamlessly integrate these stars. This all is supported by their efficiency, by their true shooting percentages, any analytical measure that supports how efficient this team was, on top of the fact that they led the NBA in assists. So that just tells you right there, this was not a selfish team. They were willing to do whatever it took to win. When you talk about how this team was elite on both sides of the ball, they were not only tied for number 1 defensively in the league next to the San Antonio Spurs, they were the best offensive team in the league as well. So when you talk about the team aspect, they check both sides of the floor. When you look at the depth on this team, Andre Iguodala, who was a Finals MVP, guys like David West, who was a former All-Star, you had other players on this team, Ian Clark, Patrick McCaw. The talent on this team was just so far gapped from the rest of the league. It just walking in the door before a game was even played, before the ball was even dribbled, everyone had the Warriors picked to win it all. So they had a lot to live up to. They had huge expectations before the ball was dribbled, and they delivered.
So I want to pick up real quick, and then I want to get to what he talked about, because I feel like he might have fell into what I was hoping he would. I finished off with the 3 straight MVPs from Larry Bird, which, by the way, I understand that Durant and Curry are 2 players, but Bird has as many MVPs as those 2 combined, for what it's worth. Larry Bird also essentially put up a 50, 40, 90 stat line that year. And in terms of being cohesion and battle tested, talk about how good the Warriors are. We're talking about a Celtics team in which every major contributor, minus Walton and Sheeting, I actually look up how you say his name, had played with each other for 4 to 7 years. The big 3 for the Celtics at this point had already been to 3 finals and won 2 of them. And so in terms of, if we're going to talk about grit when it comes down to the final minutes or who has the clutch gene between these 2 teams, I think that's a slight advantage there to the Celtics. This is also the year that Mikal became a starter. We're talking about arguably the best front court of all time. The big 3 of the Warriors, however, at that time were only 1-1. They had won 1 and lost 1. And if Kyrie doesn't get hurt in the year that they won, the Warriors might have not won any before Durant got there. And Durant himself was 0-1 coming over to the Warriors. For all these reasons, I think the Celtics are a better embodiment and definition of what a basketball team is compared to the 2017 Warriors, which my opponent kind of stated, acquiring what is easily the best roster in the NBA that no other team could touch at the time. I went back and did a little digging, right? I looked up the preseason championship odds going all the way back to 1984. There are only 3 times a team has been a negative bet. In other words, you put $100 down, you will get less than 100 back. That is how favored they were. All 3 times were the Durant version of the Warriors. Now, my opponent will say that makes them a good team. I would say, do we really know? If you're just simply going to acquire 4 All-Stars, 2 MVPs, a defensive player of the year, I know Draymond was drafted and whatnot, but acquiring someone like Durant on a 73-win team the year before, I'm not sure if we can call that a good team, a team who was never tested, a team who has the longest odds against the next best team preseason-wise that we've ever seen. So again, amazing roster, absolutely, one of the best, no doubt. The firepower is off the charts. Are they a good team? We don't even know. We don't even know. They were so far and away easily the best constructed roster in which the Warriors had to sacrifice almost nothing to get Durant. Durant largely took a pay cut to go there. They essentially bought 2 rings. I'm not sure if I personally would count that as being a good team that's been battle tested and has played a minimum of like 4 to 7 years together with as many accolades and players and stars and talent that the Warriors have. So are they a good team? I'm not sure we even know.
I just think when we get caught up in how the teams were created, what they did the year before, I didn't say the 2015 Warriors or the 2016 Warriors were the greatest team of all time. I'm specifically talking about one Warriors team and what they did in that specific year. However the team was put together, that's how the team was put together. We can only judge these teams based on what they do and the expectation we put on them. We've seen so many teams get put together, great teams get put together and fail to live up to those expectations. Just like in 1986, where the Lakers were favored to win it all, but they got upset by the Houston Rockets in the Western Conference Finals. They did not live up to expectation. So the Golden State Warriors, who came into the season as heavy favorites, came into the season's preseason odds to win 67 games, lived up to all those expectations amidst all the criticism, amidst all the hype, amidst all the media coverage. We've seen so many teams falter in those particular situations and not only succeed, they did it in a tougher league. When we look at what the Boston Celtics did in that particular year, let's not dance around the competition that they faced. You're talking about a playoff series in which 3 of the teams that made the playoffs were below 500 in 1986 in the East. 3 of the teams that made the playoff in the West were also below 500. They faced a first-round opponent in Chicago Bulls that was 22 games below 500. They faced an Atlanta Hawk team that was deplete of talent with only Dominique Wilkins. They did not face the type of talent. So when you look at what the Warriors were able to do, when you look at who they were able to face, who they were able to beat on the road there, far, far more competition across the board in the East, far more competition across the board in the West, far more all-stars across the board in each round of the playoffs. They just faced more competition. They not only lived up to all the hype, they exceeded all the hype. They were the best team on both sides of the ball, and we can get mad about how they accumulated the talent, but let's not gloss over the fact that Boston also had their own unique ways of accumulating talent. They traded for McHale and Robert Parrish in a trade. This is not organic. They traded for Dennis Johnson. So player mobility helped the Golden State Warriors create their team, but also Boston creating and crafting trades here and there to formulate these. So it's not like you create your team, how you create your team. We can only judge you by what you do. And what the Warriors did against the teams they did it against, beating a 60-win San Antonio team, right? Beating a 50-win Utah Jazz team with 2 All-Stars. They beat the best competition, including LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the best teams in the East. And they had this expectation on top of their head the entire time.
Yeah, so the reason why I bring up how the Warriors were put together is, again, like we said, context matters. We're talking about a team, right? A team and how they play together, the cohesion, what they go through, the intangibles. And the reason why I bring that up is that when it comes to these intangibles, or kind of like the off-the-court things we talk about, the Celtics just have much more in spades than picking up a guy and just throwing star power onto the court and winning. Is your formula a good formula? I mean, I don't know. If you simply just through fortunate timing and networking, by the way, it's not like the Warriors, like I said, really sacrificed anything to get Durant. It was essentially house money, right? When you have the fastest car and you win the race, that is no reason to be celebrated or to say we lived up to the hype. You simply did what you were supposed to do, right? And again, we're having to get nitpicky here, right? So me bringing up how they were built is not tearing anyone down, right? And the reason I bring up the odds, right? We can, again, going to this era is better than the other. I've never really bought into that. I think that's a little bit of a non-starter in this debate, right? Relative to whatever talent was what in whatever era or year, the Warriors clearly had the best of it, right? They clearly had the best car to win the race. The Celtics clearly didn't have the best car to win the race, and they still overcame odds to be the best team, right? And again, as much as we want to talk about this or that, being 50-1 at home, I'm again, we talk about X factors and pedigrees. I'm not really sure how you get around that one, correct? And you had also brought up that Iguodala won a Finals MVP. So did Dennis Johnson. Not many people remember that. And then you had also gotten to who they played, correct? So we're talking about you're talking about the Portland Trailblazers, or let's start with who Boston played, right? They played a 57-win team, Milwaukee Bucks. They played, obviously, you mentioned the Atlanta Hawks, although they were still a 51-win team. And they beat the Houston Rockets, who are a 51-win team, and beat the defending champions, correct? In that year that they went on that run, if you sort of look at who they beat, they went up against a total of what would be 6 MVPs, 5 Defensive Player of the Years, 22 first all-team defenses, 11 scoring titles, 2 rebounding titles, 3 steals, 5 block titles, right? But even if we were just to compare the rosters real quick in terms of who did what, right? Boston has the best player in an MVP, NBA, All-NBA first team, the only one between the two teams to have that. They had an All-NBA defensive first team, an All-NBA second defensive team, and a 6th man of the year. I think the 6th man of the year is important. This is the 3rd straight year Boston won a 6th man of the year with Mikal twice and Walton once. Obviously, the teamwork, the aspect of the strategy of what Boston is doing to be that deep and win 3 straight 6th man of the years, I think is a tip of the cap to a better team.
Yeah, I want to get back to focus, and it's just funny that you talk about team, but yet you're having a heavy focus on individuals. And that individual is Larry Bird. When we talk about the greatest teams of all time, we only talk about these teams as the greatest teams of all time because they had an overwhelming talent gap, because they succeeded beyond, because they dominated the competition. And we don't really penalize them for having great talent or just being great in and of themselves. Again, this is why I don't punish the Warriors for how they acquired the talent, just like I don't punish the Celtics for how they acquired all of their talent, which a lot of people said it was due a lot of shady trades, you know. And when you look at some of the other teams that were mismanaging their draft picks, this was a Boston Celtic team that in and of themselves was pretty stacked. They drafted Len Bias in 1986. He just unfortunately died because of the drug epidemic in the 1980s, which this is the same drug epidemic that also hampered a lot of the other teams in the league, which led to the league simply being just the overall diminished product in the 1980s. So when you talk about the poor mismanagement of draft picks from other teams like the Cavs, like the Clippers, like the Warriors, didn't know what they were doing, Celtics were able to take advantage of it and also build their own dominant roster for that particular time. The Warriors were also able to build a dominant roster. They just really good at it. They were able to capitalize and just create a team. So when you look at this Warrior team, you're looking at Steph Curry, you're looking at Kevin Durant, both of these guys, second team All-NBA, Draymond Green, defensive player of the year in the moment. I'm not adding up the accolades of what everybody else did in the totality. When you look at who they went up against, Damian Lillard and CJ McCullough were all-star caliber players in the moment that year. When you talk about Rudy Gobert and Gordon Hayward, they were all-star players that year. When you look at Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge, they were all-stars and all-NBA players that particular year. LeBron James, first team All-NBA, all-star. Kyrie Irving, all-star, Kevin Love in that year, not everything they did in their total career. So in the moment versus the talent that they faced, they just faced a ton of talent and they were able to dominate that talent. When you look at the playoff run that they made, to go 16-1 in the playoffs, you dominate, you sweep a 60-win team. You sweep the Utah Jazz. I mean, the only time you lose a game is you lose one game in the NBA Finals. So that means when you look at all of the records they broke, they broke over 20 NBA records as a team. Individually, Steph Curry broke over 15 individual records. Kevin Durant broke over 12 individual NBA records in that thing. And when you look at what Draymond Green was able to do, it's at his position, triple doubles, being one of the most versatile players, defending, being the ultimate team player. Man, it's just hard. It's hard to use that.
Yeah, so we can also talk about who they had, right? So I'll take the MVP over the defensive player of the year, correct? I'll take Bird over, if you want to talk about just awards, right? There's also 2 All-NBA defensive team selections for your 2 All-NBA second team. Like, it's pretty even across the board. And the fact that you guys had 4 All-Stars, this gets back to my point. You talk about who they played and you say, well, both of these teams have such a talent gap. They don't. That was my point of bringing up the preseason odds. The talent gap of the Warriors compared to what the Celtics had is not even comparable. It's completely night and day relative to their times. 4 All-Stars, like we hardly ever see that. So you can talk about who the Warriors played, but it doesn't matter because no matter who they went up against, Warriors had 4 of the top 5 players on the floor most of the time, right? So again, you can talk about the eras, you can talk about this or that. The talent gap is not up for debate. The Warriors were far and away the most talented team. They had acquired the best roster, right? Again, trying to compare that and saying Boston also had a good team when they had to sacrifice draft picks, they had to give up players, they had to make moves that happened 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in advance. And also the Celtics drafted McHale. I think you said they traded for him, unless it was a draft day trade. But they drafted McHale as well. They took a big risk on Bird, drafting him a year early. And again, I know none of this particularly is explaining the specific on-ball or on-the-court things that kind of matter when we usually talk about how great a team is, right? But again, we have to get nitpicky. And so I think part of the context is talking about how this 2017 Warriors team reached such heights, correct? And rather, the way I would kind of put it is if you want to complain about how Boston did it, at least Boston stabbed you in the front, right? They didn't get on this banana boat culture and want to beat LeBron James in the East, and Kevin Durant couldn't win without a bunch of help. So to make a deal like that where you take less money, the team gives up nothing for you, and it's a 2-year rental essentially, considering you got hurt the 3rd year, it's a 2-year rental essentially to buy rings. I don't think that is a good litmus test versus how Boston got there and what Boston had done previously. And again, how they made their teams. Boston actually had to give up things to get their players, correct? And they took a chance on Bill Walton. They made some other moves to get some guys, but acquiring it through stabbing you in the front, right? Versus making a backdoor deal and networking and banana bolt and stabbing you in the back and buying rings, I think is a little different in terms of this team building thing we're talking about here.
3, 2, 1.
Well, this is I think with the 80s being so far removed, people forget the little stories, a lot of the things that were going on with the Celtics. Yes, to acquire the pick to draft McHale, they traded to get that pick in the Robert Parrish trade. So that was part of the Robert Parrish trade. Also, how did they acquire Robert Parrish, right? Robert Parrish, after struggling with Golden State, losing record in 79, Parrish demanded a trade. He openly expressed his desire to play with the league, to at least to him, play with the league's best player in Larry Bird. He stated this to Rob Nealman of the Boston Globe in 1979. This is when Robert Parrish had stormed off the court after a blowout loss to the Los Angeles Lakers. Right? Robert Parrish wanted to go play with the best players. He facilitated that trade to Golden State. When we talk about how Bill Walton landed on the Boston Celtics, they recruited Bill Walton. Larry Bird and those guys recruited Bill Walton. Bill Walton was actually going to be done with playing basketball. He was dealing with all those injuries. They recruited him to come over there, take a lesser role to help them win championships. So when we talk about and we try to act like all of these things were organic, like players like Robert Parrish, who was a top 10 player in the MVP voting, right? was disgruntled. He admitted, he said, I want to play with the best player in the league. He says, I know I can't carry the load on a title team by myself. This is what Robert Parrish said in 1979 to the Boston Globe. He said, I can't do it. I'm not a leader like that. I need to go team up. And team up is exactly what he did. He teamed up with the team, the player that he wanted to go team up with. So let's not act like everything is all on the up and up with the Boston Celtics. It wasn't. However the team was put together is however the team was put together. I only judged them based on what they did. And you've already admitted that the Golden State Warriors have the superior talent. You've already admitted that they have superior accomplishments. You just admitted that accomplishment-wise, they were better. You talk about how Boston was better at home. How about being better on the road? The Golden State Warriors, next to the Chicago Bulls, the 96 Bulls, the best road team in NBA history. That's where you face adversity. That's where things get tough. Winning at home, all good teams can win at home. Winning on the road is what separates the best from the best. They were second best behind the 96 Bulls as far as winning on the road. And yes, they had a ton of talent, but we've seen a ton of talent get put together and not complete the job. The fact that they had expectations put on them before they dribbled a basketball and they lived up to every single expectation. There was no, even amidst injury in the first round, amidst a lot of different types of adversity in that particular season, they were able to overcome the odds and live up to every expectation that was placed on them.
3,
right? And
2, 1.
Yeah, I think living up to expectation is kind of a moot point when we're talking about like all-time great title-winning teams. Like all of them are living up to expectations, right? And again, you put expectations on yourself when you make the move that Durant did. Again, this is kind of proving my point in a way in terms of like the difference, right, of how these teams were constructed. I do find it interesting we're getting stuck on that. I think we both find that a little more interesting than perhaps maybe exactly everything that's going on the court. But I don't think you're going to get a lot of love from the basketball crowd or basketball fans trying to compare Parrish going to Boston versus Durant, who was an actual MVP, had been to a finals, led a team to a finals, and went and joined up with a 73-win Golden State Warrior team. That's what I mean. Like, these two things are not comparable, just as how we look at, yes, these are both two loaded teams. And by the way, I never said that Golden State was more talented. I said they had a lot of talent, a lot of achievements, as does Boston. But again, looking at the difference, they're both loaded teams, right? But the difference that Golden State had over the rest of the league versus what Boston was compared to. And by the way, looking at preseason odds and all that, the gauntlet to run was in the East, right? And if you go look at what the odds were for the Spurs for the 2 years they were second in the West after the Warriors, for those two Durant years, it's a disgusting difference. Like, it's not even close. And so I just wanted to finish up on that, right? And so ultimately, like when we come to these teams, right, I think the 86 Celtics can do more. I think the Warriors, I don't want to call them one-dimensional, but their identity, I would say, is one-dimensional. They're a deep shooting perimeter, jump shooting team. I think that is easier to game plan for than someone like the Celtics. The Celtics are one of the rare teams that can play small ball with a big lineup and not have to really change or do anything. They could run all day. Everyone can defend. DJ is arguably one of the best defensive guards of all time, the most all-NBA defensive selections behind Kobe for guards. Obviously, Bird speaks for itself. Multiple-time All-Star, Sixth Man of the Year, Mikal and Parrish. Danny Ainge was no slouch in his own right. Again, our stars and our players can go 45 minutes, no problem, right? In a 7-game series. I think you brought up assists, right? And this is what I meant. I said earlier, the differences are very minuscule. I think the assists per game for the Warriors was like 30, and the assists per game for the Celtics is like 28 or 29 or something like that, right? So again, anytime one team has led the league in something, I guarantee you the other one's right behind them, correct? And so ultimately, I think the Celtics can do more. I think it is easier to throw a wrench in what
3,
the Warriors want to do compared to
1.
stopping the Celtics.
I just think at the end of the day, again, I don't want to harp on how these teams were put together. However, we're not judging them. We're not judging GMs. We're judging teams, right? if you want to get on the GMs about how they did their job, get on the GMs. That's a different conversation. But getting on the court, dribbling the basketball, getting it done, when you look at what the Warriors were able to accomplish as a team, right? So when you look at some of the things that they were accomplished, best record in the league or best record in the playoffs, 16-1 run, hell of a run, right? Longest playoff winning streak, fastest team to clinch a playoff berth, most consecutive wins in the playoffs, fewest playoff losses, largest comeback in the Western Conference Finals, 3 consecutive finals appearances, first team to have 4 All-Stars selected 2 consecutive years, highest offensive rating. And when we talk about them being one-dimensional, it's funny that you say they're one-dimensional, but they led the league in paint points. They lead the league in paint points, but they're one-dimensional offense. And then they're one-dimensional, but they're also tied with the San Antonio Spurs being the best defensive team in the league. That's called balance to me. The fact that you can lead the league in paint points, be an elite 3-point shooting team, be the best defensive team, be the best offensive team. You don't get much more balanced than that. And Draymond Green even stated, along with Steve Kerr, we lead with our defense, not our offense. And I think there was a misconception because they were 3-point shooters that's all they did was chuck up threes. When you talk about innovation of the game, they've done things that have innovated the game as far as the 5-out offense, the split action offense that now every single team from high schools to colleges to NBA are utilizing. When you look at defensively, they were able to start implementing zone coverages that we never would have saw deployed in the NBA, a box and one, right? So they had unique strategies, right? They were very innovative, right? They changed the game. Kevin Durant opened up player mobility to a new degree. You can look at it as a negative or a positive. I'm not comparing it to what Robert Parrish did. That was just an example to show you that Robert Parrish did the same thing that KD did. Disgruntled, could not lead, could not win by yourself. But you guys like to give those players a pass and not even discuss those stories when they do it, but you kill Kevin Durant. Right? When you talk about the Celtics and all the trades and all the things that they did to acquire their talent, you give off the presumption that they were all organic, and that team was far from organic. You act like the Celtics. You talk about the Warriors recruiting KD, but you don't mention how the Boston Celtics recruited Bill Walton. They did the same things that the Warriors did. The Warriors were just better at it, just like they were better at every other element of the game, from winning, individual, overall accomplishments, dominance over far superior competition, and it's just not even close. This is why you avoided talking about the lackluster talent in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. You didn't want to talk about all of those losing teams with losing records, and I could talk about the strength of both conferences.
Yeah, well, I can talk about whatever I want, so.
Oh, that was a good debate. Went back and forth. It started to get a little it got stuck on one subject, got a little heated, but yeah, I thought that was a great debate. 2 great teams being discussed of who is greater. And for the people that are watching, if you're watching back later, you're able to vote on the community poll on who you thought won. I'm going to drop the link in a few minutes to see if anyone wants to call in. But Nick, how do you think you did? And what is there anything you want to say about the debate?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good both ways. I just they're both 2 talented teams, but I really don't get the argument that the Warriors weren't just head and shoulders better than anyone else they had faced or was even in the league when they put that team together, right? And so you can look at it as, well, they have so much talent, they're good, right? And I'm looking at it as they had so much talent, we don't even really know how good of a team they actually were, right? If you just come in with the fastest car and you win the race front to start or front to back, right? I mean, it's a route. Yeah, don't get me wrong, but did you really show me anything as a team per se compared to the 86 argument? I just think the 86 argument has more intangibles.
Lamont, how do you think you did, and how do you think the debate went?
No, I thought I did fine. It's what I want to talk about. Like, people harp on talent, and he talked about the talent a lot. I think a lot of us would universally agree that the greatest Olympic team of all time was the 92 team because of the collection of talent first. You amass that much talent. The first thing, once you amass that much talent, it almost always turns into some form of dominance, which is what that 92 Dream Team did. The talent helps you become dominant. right? Now, we've seen some teams be dominant without the talent. For example, like those Piston teams in the 2000s, they could lead with their defense, but they didn't have a lot of the big headlining names. When I'm focusing on this Warrior team, I'm saying they have the star power. That star power led to dominance. They had an average point margin of 11 points per game, which was dominant. They went into the playoffs and they didn't have any letdowns. They dominated everybody, including the 60-win San Antonio team, and then dominated LeBron James, who was arguably the best player in the league at that time. It was dominance across the board. And I always tell people this on my show. When I was growing up and I was going to gyms to go hoop, you know what we tried to do on that sideline? We tried to put together the best team possible so we can stay on the court the longest and run the court. And it was on everybody else on the side sitting out. It was on them to figure out, you need to figure out how to put a five together to beat us. Otherwise, we're going to run the gym for the entire day while you guys sit on the sideline. This is how basketball's always been. It's been like this in high school. We've seen it in college where Duke and a lot of the best teams, they snatch up as many 5 stars as possible and go dominate. And we see it in the NBA, especially now with player mobility. And you can load up on talent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does work, that can get you into the category of being one of the best teams of all time, because you check all the boxes in so many different elements. And I just think that Celtic team, they were good. I just don't think from start to finish, they beat out the Warriors. They weren't the favorites coming in. They finished as the champions. The Warriors started as the favorites, overwhelming, ran the regular season, dominated the playoffs, and finished as the best. And that's equatable to me as one of the greatest teams of all time.
I guess another way to just rephrase what you're saying is that it would be four highly powered individuals versus the 86 team, is even how it still comes off to me the way you just said that.
No.
All of these guys versus the 86 Celtics, the four main ones.
Because the strength of that team was their bench. That's what the bench, it was the separator. When Iguodala and those guys would come into the game, that's what essentially made them impossible to defend. Nobody had an answer for Sean Livingston. Nobody had an answer for that bench unit. It was the depth of that team that made them great. So yes, they were loaded at the top with the talent, but let's not act like it was that bench lineup. When they made those first substitutions, that's when they started barbecuing teams. They didn't have an answer for the depth and the experience of that team. And that was key for that team right there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Livingston played like 16 minutes in the playoffs. He's their 6th in minutes. So I don't know. I mean, we can go around all day, right? So not a big deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I think his service went out and he just dropped off here.
Yeah, I don't really agree with the whole depth argument. I mean, the Celtics had 3 straight 6th man of the year. They had Walton coming off the bench. I don't really agree with the whole depth one. That's a little much for me, I think. Scott Weidman was a 2-time All-Star himself and all defensive selection one year, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think both teams have an argument for being in the top teams of all time. I don't want to say what I would have said because that I'm trying to stay as unbiased here as possible.
Yeah, and I guess like for me, the whole like this team's really talented and that team's really talented. It was like the Wilt versus Curry thing. Like both sides like have such a talent argument, right? Golden State's first in that or second in that. The Boston Celtics were 3rd in opponents' points per game, 8th in points per game. And in terms of defensive rating, they were 1st, 3rd in offensive rating, right? Their difference was like 9.2 or something like that. So again, like the way he says that Golden State was so dominant as a team, like Boston is right there behind them in just about anything and everything, or better than, right? So,
I mean, you said the key word, behind them. I mean, you just said,
or in front of them, yeah. And the things that the Warriors beat the Celtics at, the things, not everything, the Celtics are right behind them. For how dominant they are, Boston's right behind them in the things they lead in.
I know, but we go with, okay, coming into the seasons, let's just check off some boxes. Coming into the seasons, who had the higher expectation, the Celtics or the Warriors?
The expectation for both was to win a ring. So
No, I know.
the
I'm just
same.
saying, as far as, like the odds and things go, who was the odds-in favorite to win it all to start the season? Golden State or Boston?
Golden State was, yeah.
Okay. Now, then when they played a regular season, out. We can maybe say that's a wash. They were both 67 and 15. I'm not going to kill them for playing in a weak East and in a soft Western Conference.
Why do you say weak East? Have you seen the preseason odds of like the East versus the West in the 80s?
Well, I say weak East because I'm basing it on, because I had a coach tell me before he died, Lute Olson. He said, you are who your record is. This is what he told me. And if you are below 500, this is who you are. So when I see 3 teams make the playoffs that are below 500, well, to me, they are what their record is.
Who did Boston play, though?
Well, Boston started off by playing the Chicago Bulls, a team that was 22 games below 500.
Right.
And I mean, first thing I got to ask myself is, how does a team 22 games below 500 even make the playoffs? Right.
Expansion era.
So at that point, you play soft competition to start. I'll give it to you.
Versus a 41 and 41 Portland team,
but I'll give it to you.
I'll
give it to you. Portland was just as soft, and that's my favorite team. I never had any expectation that Portland was going to beat them, but as we progress on and we get to that San Antonio team, and we look at that Utah Jazz team, and then we look at the Cavs in the finals, because the Houston Rockets, this was a very young Houston Rocket team. Ralph Sampson's just getting his footing. He struggled in the finals mightily because of his inexperience. Hakeem was essentially by himself on that team. Atlanta Hawks, they were all young. Dominique Wilkins essentially by himself, the second leading scorer on that team, only averaged 12 points per game. Right, Kevin Willis, I think Kevin Willis and John Koncak versus very young players. They beat up on very young, inexperienced teams. This Hawk team wasn't ready. The best team they played was the Milwaukee Bucks. But again, the Milwaukee Bucks, did they even have a true star outside of Terry Cummings?
You are who your record says you are, right?
Terry Cummings, but what I'm saying is
57 wins.
They were good, and that's who they beat. And we'll give them credit for that. But when you look at who the Warriors beat, it's just the road to success. They had far more hurdles in front of them than the Boston Celtics did. Far more hurdles, far more teams that could potentially take them down. But the Warriors dominated. But no,
we just went over that. They're such favorites that no one is going to take them down. That's the whole point.
And whose fault is that?
The competition that they played is kind of irrelevant compared to actually it matters who Boston played because it's much more comparable.
And that's what makes you one of the greatest teams of all time. The fact
I don't think
no one else can touch you
makes you a good team.
So you saying the Celtics didn't manipulate, or did they not buy theirs?
What did the Warriors have to give up to get Durant?
Nothing, essentially.
All right.
Other than cap space, other than letting Harrison Barnes walk.
Well, yeah, that's a hard decision, huh?
No, it's not a hard decision, but the thing is, people forget that the goal of basketball on every single level is to improve your team to such a degree on a year-by-year basis, nobody has a chance to beat you. Right now,
right, but
that's
building that great team, does that make you a good team, or just like the Yankees, right? If the Yankees go out and buy the best roster every year, are they really the best? They're kind of the best team by default, but are they the best team? Do they play the best team ball?
Now, what determines if that team put together is the best team? Because like you said, the Yankees put together a ton of teams and didn't win it all. Sometimes we've seen the Brooklyn Nets put together a super team, didn't win it all. We've seen a lot of teams put together super teams, don't win it all. So
why didn't they just keep Durant? Why didn't they just keep Durant and keep winning?
No, but Durant left on his own.
But
what you talking about?
Because he didn't want to win anymore.
You talking about the Warriors?
Yeah, why wouldn't the Warriors or them?
Well, the Warriors couldn't control Durant. Durant wanted to leave on his own for his own personal reasons. That's neither here nor there. That has nothing to do with this team. This team's greatness was about, yes, they had the talent. Now you got to make the talent work. Then they ultimately turned into one of the most cohesive teams in NBA history, defensively and offensively and efficient wise. They might be the most efficient offense in NBA history by the numbers. They were one of the best defenses in the league. That takes chemistry to be great on both sides of the ball.
I think the issue is that you are impressed with the lofty expectations that they lived up to. I'm saying I'm not impressed. Like, the stats in the preseason and the rankings prove they simply just did what they were supposed to do. I'm not even sure if they over or underachieved. That's my thing. The Celtics, looking at what they started with compared to the rest of the field, achieved more, went through more, and overcame more odds to be a better team and come out on top. I understand what you're saying, where talent and a good team have a lot of overlap, 100%, right? But both these teams are stacked. And I would argue that after the top 4 of Golden State, it really drops off compared to what Boston has in the 5, 6,
Okay,
7
then
slot.
tell me about Boston. Outside of their starting lineup, tell me about that bench.
What, 6th man of the year? I mean,
okay, no. Tell me about it. Yeah,
but wouldn't that already make them better after you're starting 4? Having 6th man of the year?
Tell me about them.
Scott Weidman, 2-time All-Star, defensive selection.
Was he an All-Star in '86?
No, but he was a 2-time All-Star not too far.
What did he do for the Celtics that year?
Scott Weidman, I think he played about 17 minutes, something like that. He was a defensive guy. He's a defensive specialist for the most part.
What did Bill Walton do that year?
6th man of the year, 20 minutes a game.
Okay, tell me about his
team
production.
Player, one of the best passing big men of all time, great defender.
No. What did he do that year?
What do you want me to say? What are you looking for?
Okay, so Bill Walton was on the downslide. He joined the team because he was walking out the league. He was ready to give up the game because of injuries. So what he essentially did was he joined a team that, because of his handicaps with the injuries, he could still go be effective on a great team. He was a good player, but so he basically went to a team that could make up for his deficiencies and injuries. That's okay. I love that. They went and recruited him. Let's not pretend they didn't. They went and got, just like the Bulls went and got Rodman. I get it. I understand you need great players to win, but I don't knock them for acquiring Bill Walton. Even though Bill Walton at that time was a shell of himself. Let's not pretend he did win 6th man of the year, but I'm almost positive he won 6th man of the year because the league was completely diminished the talent once you get past the starting lineup on most teams. And he was just the best of a whole bunch of bad options. I think he averaged less than 10 points a game, and he only averaged less than 20 minutes a game. It was not a very impressive stat line for a 6th man. I'm not even gonna pretend like he did anything that special. So I mean, it just is what it is. That's all. I mean,
I don't think Draymond's defensive player of the year is that special either. So
it might not be. It might not. but it might not be. But he won it, and I just have to give him credit for winning it. And he also was first team all defense, and he also led the number 1 defense in the league. They were tied with San Antonio, number 1 in the league. So whatever he was doing defensively, it helped propel the Warriors to being one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. So whatever
the Celtics were the best defensive team.
They were.
Yeah. And they were 3rd in offensive rating too. So that's what I mean, where Warriors are 1st and 3rd in something, you just flip it around.
No. The Warriors were 1st and 1st. They were tied for first with San Antonio. They were 1st by a long shot offensively above everybody else. That's slightly better to me. That's better.
And the different rating though is still like 9 to 11, right? So it's like, so I mean, we can slice and dice it anyway. They're neck and neck and everything.
But who generally has the slight advantage in all of these things? Who do you
think is a better rebounding team?
That's just something. It's just hard to computate because of eras and styles of play.
Who do you think is the better defensive overall team?
I would give Boston. If even though it's just hard, I would just have to say, okay, we'll give Boston better defensive team.
I think they're clearly a better. That's a huge advantage for Boston.
It's hard to say clearly, right? When the
Zaza and the
Warriors were just as good defensively. They because defensively, how great do you have to be defensively to essentially sweep through the entire playoffs? And you're playing far better competition. They didn't drop 2 games in the finals to a lackluster Houston Rocket team.
You can keep saying better talent, but it's kind of, I think that falls on deaf ears. That's such a subjective take, and you're just saying the guys on the bench sucked in the 80s or something, which is just kind of hard to back up.
So So when I say that the Houston Rockets were young and thin on talent outside of Ralph Sampson and Akeem, am I wrong or right?
No, you would be right.
When I say that the Atlanta Hawks relied heavily on 30-point per game Dominique Wilkins, and outside of that, they did not have any significant help around them, am I wrong or right?
You're right, but you're also are the Warriors far and ahead? Were so superior to anyone they even could sniff them, right? Correct?
This is why I have them ranked so high. They are
Right.
far and ahead above everybody by such a long shot, and they accomplish everything you could potentially accomplish. This is why they're right behind the 96 Bulls.
Team ball, though, by team ball, or by just assembling the most talent. That's the difference I want to make.
Because I've seen talent get assembled and they can struggle to play as a team. We saw this when the Lakers tried to put together a super team with Karl Malone and Gary Payton. They lost because they couldn't play as a team.
I just wanted to answer the question. Like, do you think they played better team ball, or do you think they had the better talent?
They had the best talent and they had the best chemistry in the NBA.
And their chemistry was just because they won?
No, their chemistry showed in how effective they were offensively, how effective they were defensively, right? How balanced they were. There was not one person taking up the bulk of the load in anything. They had 3 guys averaging 20 points per game. So even though KD could walk in and say, I'm the best player in the world at the time, because he was argued that he was better than LeBron at that time, he said, you know what? I'm not going to come in and try to drop 30. We're going to have a balanced attack. We're going to play as a team, and I'm going to buy in defensively, because people say that's the best defensive version of Kevin Durant.
Now, is that a better team? Now, is that a better team, or is that a luxury?
When you buy in,
you can take a night off.
No, it's not taking a night off. When you come
just said I don't have to drop 30. I don't think anyone on the Celtics took that
when
luxury.
you don't have to drop 30, that's not you taking a night off. That's you saying we're going to have a much more balanced attack.
I don't think just being able to defer the scoring responsibilities is a balanced attack, right? That's not a scheme. That's just handing the responsibilities over to another star. Just handing over shooting responsibilities to Curry is not a scheme.
But that would make sense if they were running an iso-centric offense. Their offense was catered
ISO's
on
not very team-oriented, right?
But they were running a pass-friendly offense, required moving the ball. You cannot be ball dominant, shoot a ton in that offense. He was going to have to sacrifice scoring to buy into the team. You have to.
Yeah, but it's not hard to sacrifice when your team is so loaded that you can just hand it over to someone else, to the reins, and they can take it. And Larry Bird didn't really have that luxury, right? Mikhail doesn't really have the luxury to say, well, someone else can play the torture chamber down low tonight. The Chief doesn't have an option to be like, I don't need to get 15 rebounds, right?
I agree. Which, again, because they didn't have those luxuries is why I don't think they were an overall better team. Larry Bird had to be great a lot more. They didn't have the more balanced attack, So again, Larry Bird could not shell up and have a bad night. Kevin McHale couldn't shell up and have a bad night because they didn't have the depth. The Warriors just had the depth to literally beat you any which way possible.
They didn't have the depth. They had 4 all-stars. That's not the. That's. I mean, if you guess you want to call that depth, that's fine. But
they had the best bench in the NBA. Name a better bench in the league at that time.
Oh, I don't know all the 2017 benches, but
but just think, was sanity.
But also,
top team.
Okay, my also question is, if you blow out someone by 20 in the third, doesn't the bench then look good over a season average, or scoring more points, getting more minutes?
They're able to consistently thrash teams, stay locked in, and not give up big leads because they're a great team. We just watched this year LeBron James and the Lakers give up so many 20-point leads this year. It was pathetic because they were a horrendous team, right? Not because they were bad players, but because they were a horrendous team led by LeBron James this year. This is to me, this is a sign. That's why I said, when you can't hold a big lead, and they did this all year long, that's an indictment on the leaders, and it's an indication of a toxic culture and team environment. Y'all can't come together as a team and hold down a 20-point lead. We watched this Warrior team play for each other. The starters on the bench, rooting on the bench guys when they're in the game, right? Everybody's playing. All these things matter. Like, it might not seem like anything.
I know they matter, but
they do matter.
it's kind of getting to the point where when you say bench scoring, okay, well, they're going to get extra minutes because, again, you have the 4 best players on the floor every night and you're blowing everyone out by 20. Yeah, their bench is going to look good. They get to come in carefree. You got a 20-point lead half of the games. We come in, we play extra minutes, get extra points, right?
That's because the Golden State Warriors were just
But it's
dominant.
not because they have a good bench. That's my point to the bench thing. I think that's a little inflated.
When they went to that bench, because when they started going to that bench, that was their death lineup. That's what they called it. That death lineup, if that death lineup did not exist with the 4 stars, they called it the death lineup when they went to the bench.
It means because they're putting them in because the starters have already won. That's the death lineup.
No, that's not. They called it the death lineup because nobody could defend it.
Okay.
That's why
whenever it was a tight game, you had a 2-point lead for the Warriors. They put in the bench players.
Whenever the game was, how many games did Sean Livingston won them a ton of games. David West helped them win a ton of games. That bench unit was elite. It just is what it is. It's just across the board. It was tough.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a great debate, gentlemen, and there was a great discussion afterwards. I tried to stay out of it as well, not to put my 2 cents in, try to keep it as unbiased as possible. But no, I thought there were great points made on both sides. It's a polarizing, there's some polarizing things that were said for both sides. But I got to get going. I promised my wife I'd only be on here for an hour. So
yeah, I got to get going too.
But thank you all. Check out NMB Sports at NMB Sports and check out FYF Sports as well. Those got some great stuff going on. You guys
one last thing. One little ironic point, right? I kind of mentioned how, the debate's over. I'm not trying to antagonize anymore. But we had mentioned how the Warriors got Durant at a favorable time. The first year that Durant was on that team, Curry was their 4th highest paid player. And they had re-signed Green, Curry, and Klay Thompson using bird rights. So I just thought that was funny. Comes full circle.
Bird rights, yeah. Do y'all have any last things before we shut it off?
Great debate. I appreciate you.
No, yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was good.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone in the live chat. And please vote in the community poll who you thought won. It'll be up in the very near future. And, thanks again, live chat. For everyone, Michael Jordan fan.